to our co-organizers. Today's event is taking place on the occasion of the Perceptions Project. For those that you don't know, it is a EU-funded project under Horizon 2020, coordinated by Senio, 3.5-year project that concerns the ways that Europe is seen by actual or potential migrants. And the main goals of this project are, first of all, to seek what the perceptions of Europe are outside Europe, mainly in the countries of origin of the actual or potential migrants, whether these perceptions are accurate or not, how these could influence the migrants' decisions, and how these are communicated in today's world, in the social media world, identifying, of course, the different narratives that exist. It also seeks to find certain perceptions that could harm individuals or even institutions, and how these harmful perceptions could be challenged for the benefit of everybody. And finally, the ways to better realize the needs of the individuals that could potentially use the perceptions toolkits that will be developed in the future. These toolkits will, for your information, consist on some creative measures for policymakers in order to react on different perceptions concerning, of course, their social, societal, and structural aspects. And I would just like to inform you that all this creative material that will be developed under the Perceptions project, as well as today's discussion and its outcomes, will be published on the web platform of Perceptions. So why today's event? Today's event actually aims to produce some context-specific reflections on the links between the migrants' perceptions and the appropriate solutions in some European countries affected by mainly the illegal migration phenomenon. And hopefully it will assist on the transfer of good practices and experience between the two organizing countries, which is Greece and Cyprus today. And why not probably introduce some tangible changes in practical responses in both institutions of both countries. So we seek to gather insight by our honorable guests, our honorable speakers today, which are all experts and practitioners in their field, by raising some awareness about the alternative perceptions of the EU and, of course, of the migrants' journey. So we want to capitalize by our participants' expertise, not only as speakers, but you also, the people that attend this event, on sharing some thoughts, opinions, experiences, and why not suggestions on these perceptions that are directly also linked to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected, of course, everybody around the globe, but mainly these last days, the people that try to reach Europe and integrate into the EU societies. So what we seek here today is to explore the impact that the pandemic had on the perceptions that shape migration patterns, on the realities that the migrants face during a health emergency, and of course, the ways that the practitioners, the first-line practitioners, the service providers adapted their activities accordingly. So the trigger for the discussion today were actually some interviews and focus group discussions that took place from the consortium partners a few months ago and concerned the perceptions that migrants as well as migration asylum actors have about EU and the ways these perceptions are received and distributed. Also the mismatches that exist between the expectations and the reality they find, and also possible ways of reaction of the institutions that manage migration. So I would just, before giving the floor to our organizers so that we can start directly our event, Just like to indicatively tell you a few quotes, a few statements from these interviews that could probably assist our discussion later on how to challenge sometimes the legitimacy of traditional narratives, highlighting sometimes some often overlooked responses, and try to attend the uncertainty that migration has, and which often contributes to the migrant sense of loss and disorientation. So someone mentioned during an interview that COVID has affected the workflow of the law enforcement agencies, but in a positive way. So this could be a point of discussion, that the border security measures have increased in all EU member states, as well as the third country during the pandemic. And finally, a Cameroonian woman migrant that was found in Cyprus said that she didn't have any sources of information because she didn't know where Cyprus in Europe was exactly. So she was told that she was going to Cyprus without having the right to decide differently. But as far as she can speak out, she believes that it's Europe a good place because her little sister lives in France already and she has a real access to healthcare. So these are some stimulations for discussion later on that could also assist not only the speakers, but the participants to try to find a few hints on how to react. And thank very much everybody, our organizers, our speakers today, that they will focus on the thematic areas that are related, of course, to the interviews and the focus group discussions taken place previously, and of course, the related field of expertise. And I would like now to give the floor to Mrs. Kassinis from Caritas Cyprus, and then Mrs. Bratska from Aditas. And well, we'll be here all time long. Whenever you feel you have any question, thought, doubt, remark, please do it on the chat. And we'll try to collect them and answer to you, give you a whole feedback after all the presentations have finished. So thank you, and we'll talk later on. Please, Ms. Kassinis, thank you very much.
Yes, hi, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. I'd like to just add my thanks for everybody for participating. I think today's, we tried very hard to come up with an efficient and recognizing that everyone is Zoom fatigued, but yet that this is really a structured and informal and valuable way to exchange, to use the pandemic as a reason to pause and to do some reflecting on some of the themes that have emerged from the project. So we're looking forward to the discussion. I don't know, I was going to introduce our first speaker, Hrishabh Sandilya, who is the co-founder of Project Phoenix and the head of the Project Phoenix office in Cyprus. Hrishabh is a valued partner of Caritas Cyprus on some integration programs, sort of innovation approaches here in Cyprus, but also because he's quite an insightful researcher. And I think that he was very quick, in a partnership with some other organizations here in Cyprus, to pull together a very interesting, pithy analysis of the impact of the pandemic on migrants. And so he's going to give us the view from Cyprus and get us get the day kicked off. Thank you. Over to you, Hrishabh.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's an honor to be here. I was hoping to share my screen, but I don't see I can do that. So if you can enable that, then I'll try and speak to the slides because it might be a little easier to follow what I'm saying because I'm going to do it quite quickly in the next 10 minutes. Okay, so just some background in the sense that Project Phoenix is a migrant-led organization that focuses on the systemic change of the inclusion ecosystem. Our programming focuses on a fellowship program to help refugees start businesses, transdisciplinary research, which I'm going to be presenting to you today, and some innovative partnerships that Elizabeth talked about. So today's presentation is based on a three-part research series we ran with the Friedrich Ebert Foundation in Cyprus, looking at the impact of COVID on refugees in Cyprus. Part one was desk research based on interviews with practitioners. The second one was actually the first of a kind survey anyone's ever run in Cyprus with refugees directly and migrants. And the third is a white paper with solutions which were coming out right now. Just broadly summarizing, what I see has been the impact of COVID. The pandemic has resulted in a perceptible deterioration in the quality of life of refugees and migrants in Cyprus, with a discernible impact on personal freedoms, livelihoods, economic security, mental health, general well-being, and personal development. I know it's affected us all as citizens of the world, but I think if you're a little lower on the rung on the social ladder, it has had much worse of an impact, and we've seen that as true in the case of refugees and migrants in Cyprus. And I'll try and break down those different impacts for you very quickly over the next 5 or 7 minutes. So broadly, the pandemic has initially affected the general ability of refugees and migrants to get on with their lives. I know, again, that's a statement that you can take with a pinch of salt, because it has also affected us in terms of getting on with our lives. But what I really mean is the fact that they have struggled to access information clearly about the pandemic. And as you know, the situation is fluid. We've had, over the last 2 years, gone from lockdowns to vaccine mandates, to vaccine requirements, to SMS-based short codes in Cyprus, constant need for rapid tests. And when you have a refugee and migrant base that speaks multiple languages, and you know, a large part of the refugee and migrant base in Cyprus don't really speak English that well, especially those from West Africa, but also those from the Middle East, you really struggle. And you know, for a government that initially operates in Greek and then translated into English, the translations don't quite make it down the line, and you do see refugees and migrants getting caught out on the wrong end of these things. And I remember a couple of weeks ago, actually, when the first rapid test mandates came in, when you needed a rapid test to board a bus, and given how poor public transport is in Cyprus, unfortunately, I actually saw 2 refugees who got on the bus without the rapid test and then couldn't get on the bus because the driver wouldn't let them on, and they had no idea this information was required, and therefore got stuck out. And you know, the buses only run every couple of hours, and they had to go and wait another 5 hours to get back because they had to get a test then. So this is the kind of example of what the lack of information does, and it really does make their lives more difficult in that sense. Secondly, the lack of access to healthcare. I'm going to say there are some positives here, in the sense that systemically there have been barriers to healthcare for access to refugees in Cyprus, because they're not part of the general health system. And initially, when we first did the research 2 years ago, and through the survey, they really struggled to get access to COVID-19 tests, because the first bunch of tests were all done through private labs, and the government wasn't testing so much, and because they had no access to doctors, they couldn't get public tests. So that was the first major issue, even though that's improved now because rapid tests are available for a few euros. We also see that the pandemic has exacerbated pre-existing health conditions and chronic health concerns. Again, this goes for the general population as well, but especially since they don't have access to the health system, and they have to do it through the general hospitals, this has really pushed back a lot of their long-term pre-existing conditions, whether it's heart conditions or diabetes and things like that. It's also made mental health impacts much worse, in the sense that, and I'll talk about this a little more, but the one positive in this sense has been the government has been fairly successful in getting the COVID-19 vaccination program out to the refugee American population in Cyprus. And our take is that this should serve as an example for better healthcare in general.
Sorry, Mr. Sandilya, if you want to share screen, you can push the share screen in order to, if you want us to see something.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Perfect. This okay? Yeah. So that was the healthcare bit. Just moving on. So again, delays in the asylum and migration procedure. And I mean, here I think there is a little sympathy for the government's position here, in the sense that just they have been quite overwhelmed. And initially you have had, the first year was filled with lockdowns, which made access to the office difficult in the first place. And now that the numbers rising in the last couple of months in Cyprus, there has been a lack of capacity from the government to deal with this. But that doesn't mean that it hasn't impacted refugees. They continue to be in asylum seekers, especially because they continue to be in a legal gray area. They have suffered delays in access to the application process itself, delays in filing claims, filing counterclaims. and the slow processing in general has impacted their legal status, their ability to get on with life and work if in the certain professions that they're allowed to work in, and has then led to other impacts in both their educational and personal development, but also in their access to finance and economic resources. Another major area, and this is actually one of the most significant impacts, has been the an almost complete reduction in access to language learning classes. As most of you know, language learning is the first step to integration, or even just getting on with your life in a new society. And simply because of the fact that most in-person classes have been cancelled, language learning, especially Greek language learning in Cyprus, has completely stopped. So you have this case where you have, West African asylum seekers coming in who don't speak English very well, don't have access to Greek language courses, don't have access to English language courses, and this only tends to compound the access to information gap, and resulting in situations where you don't have information about where rapid tests are and what rapid tests are needed to get on a bus and things like that. So this is something that can and should be addressed very, very urgently, simply because it really is impossible for them to get on with their lives if they don't really speak the language or understand what's going on, even in a basic sense. With the economic and financial impacts, again, this was something that was felt across the board. Just a little bit of background here. Asylum seekers can work in a certain number of restricted number of livelihoods in Cyprus, and well as recognized refugees can work without any restrictions. We do have a lot of asylum seekers, or at least in the past, in pre-pandemic times, who worked in the black. They worked in construction. They worked in the tourism industry. They worked in the sort of automobile industry. And these jobs basically fell off the market for the first year simply because of the pandemic and the lockdown. So there was a huge financial impact, especially for those who work illegally. And this really did result in a lot of hunger, a lot of poverty, and really did make a difference to their lives. With the tourism and construction sectors picking up now, those who were working in these sectors legally are now back in these jobs. So we have seen some improvement in the situation. But I think it's a little difficult to say that there's anything that's ever going to make up for the loss of those 12 months and the impact and how drastic those months were for them. Another thing we found was the gendered impact. We saw that, especially through the survey, that there was definitely a much more gendered impact with female asylum seekers and refugees suffering proportionately more than male asylum seekers did to the pandemic, especially when it came to domestic and child-rearing responsibilities. They were also restricted in access to contraception and reproductive healthcare. So this is something that came, and they also suffered greater declines in mental health as compared to males. So again, something to consider for policy. So those were the summary of what has been two very drastic years in terms of lockdowns and then reopenings, and now a situation where you have some recovery, but they as a group are going to recover slower than the rest of the population. There's also a general situation which I'm sure will come up, which may not be linked to the pandemic in general, but I feel in some ways does. We have massive overcrowding and overwhelming government capacities due to the new arrivals in the past couple of months. And this is not a situation that's going to go away. Relatedly, I think there's a general sense of despair and gloom and loss of hope on both sides, in the sense that you have government services and government servants who are overwhelmed, and rightfully so, because they're dealing with a lack of resources to address the situation. And you also have migrants and refugees and asylum seekers who are, cannot get access to language courses, cannot get access to basic things to get on with their lives. So you're starting to see anger and potential flashpoints, which, while it's hard to say there's a direct link to the COVID-19 pandemic, in some ways it is linked, simply because the pandemic has resulted in a lot of borders being, permanent borders being shut and closed across Europe, and Cyprus now seems to be one of the only routes in. So in some ways, the pandemic is forcing people to come into Cyprus in that sense. So it is a situation that needs to be addressed and considered as we go forward in the next 2 years by policymakers. Yeah, I think that's basically it. I hope I'm in time, and I think we have an interesting discussion as we go forward.
Great, thank you so much, Hrishabh, for setting the context. over to, I think we undo the share screen. Katerina, back over to you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Sandilya. And let's move on straight directly to our next speaker, Major Mr. Thomas Basioukas from the Hellenic Police Headquarters, who together with Commander Mr. Tournakis later on are going to speak us about the pandemic, how this has affected the border protection, and later on from the law enforcement perspective. So, Mr. Basioukas, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes. Thank you.
So, thank you, Katerina. Thank you, everyone. Let me first of all, can you hear me well? So, this is Thomas Basioukas. I'm a police major from the Hellenic Police, actually serving at the Borders Protection Division. And today I will very briefly present the law enforcement perspective, let's say, of the COVID pandemic, and I try to gather together my first findings, let's say, on what we've seen the past almost 2 years that affected the pandemic and our everyday job. So I will share my screen, and in the end of my presentation, I will be glad to reply to any of your questions. So I hope that you can see my full screen right now.
Yes, we can see it perfectly.
So let's start. So starting, I will just present a little bit what the evolution was. Probably almost everyone knows about it. So in February 2020, the presence of this new COVID-19 disease was already becoming very well known in the European continent. It had already started, since December 2019. The first cases in Greece started around the end of February, and by mid-March 2020, the situation was getting worse and worse, and the government had to impose several restrictions on mobilization, like all over Europe, actually. So the restrictions were referring to border crossings and included also the air routes, but also the restrictions inside the country. So the situation that was created greatly affected law enforcement authorities' activities, and also migrants, and also the organized crime groups, which I will specifically focus on. So the police authorities actually, for your information, apart from their everyday job, they had to deal also with COVID-19 pandemic management issues. So in a nutshell, a portion of police forces had to withdraw from their normal duties and focus more on the COVID pandemic. So what were the effects on migration management? First of all, as you can understand, in Greece, we have a lot of hotspots, a lot of migration camps, migrants camps, and actually at that period, some of them were actually very overcrowded. So this means that we had faced in the beginning a very high danger of virus spread due to the overcrowded camps. Another very significant issue that we had to face was that since we had already some migrants coming in, we had to find some special quarantine areas for the new arrivals until we clarify that they're not contaminated, and then to incorporate them in the refugee camps. And also for the cases where we had some people getting sick inside the camps, so we had to find some extra areas to keep them in, and that's not easy. So the registration and the briefing and the screening activities that we usually perform every time we have arrivals of migrants could not be implemented during the quarantine. Actually, they could be implemented, but with a very large delays. Of course, it's I think it's redundant to stress out the increased sanitary risks for all the involved staff, not only police staff, but NGOs, health staff, etc. Another thing that we saw is that as the quarantine was continuing, we saw the increased tension growing inside the camps. So this actually raised very significant security issues that we had to deal with inside the migrants' facilities. For this reason, actually, the government had to proceed to relocations, meaning that we had to evacuate. Not to evacuate, we had to transfer a portion of the migrants to other camps inside the mainland in order to alleviate the pressure and create better conditions for them. If you don't know that, I think it was for a couple of months, if I'm not mistaken, the asylum procedures were actually temporarily halted in that period. A very important issue that caused significant problems also to the migrants. And of course, as you probably know, in these Greece is not alone in this fighting this migration issues. We had also we still have the support from different various European agencies. So the problem that we faced mainly I'm referring right now in the beginning of the pandemic, when everyone was trying to see what was going on. We had some problems trying to deploy staff from various law enforcement agencies. Now, with regards to the effects on migration, it's true that especially in the beginning, when we had some strict quarantine and everyone was trying to figure out what this virus was, the migration pressure was largely reduced. This is true. But of course, what we saw is that the organized crime groups, even though they were shocked a little bit in the beginning, very quickly they resumed the activities. And actually for them, the pandemic was actually an opportunity for them to gain more money, actually, which is the profit actually is their final goal. What we've seen also is that the migration evolving a little bit, so it is still becoming more dynamic, and so the migration flows and the routes of the migrants usually change depending on the developments, meaning depending on the activities of the organized crime groups and also the law enforcement activities that they are aware of. So for this reason, they're trying to bypass all these restrictions. We've seen some dynamic situation going on. Of course, the air route, specifically the first months of the pandemic, the air route was, I can say that there was, for some period, it was completely shut down. Only the essential flights took place, and this actually affected the migration routes because, specifically for Greece, because one of the routes for migrants exiting Greece is the air route using forged documents. This could not take place without the flights. So we've seen a shift towards irregular border crossings and also migration via the sea routes. Another thing that we've seen with regards to the migrant smuggling activities was that the migrants right now, the smugglers, trying to recompensate from their loss of profits that they faced in the first months, they tried to use larger capacity means for transportation, as I said, to compensate these profit losses, which consequently created life threat and health risks to the migrants, not only with regards to possible infection of the virus, but also overcrowded vehicles, possible issues of accidents, etc. I'm mentioning this very specifically because if you follow the what's going on, we had some incidents in the Essex area, in the Essex region in the UK, and also a couple of years before in Austria, when we had some migrants suffocated in some vehicles, which was where, of course, was a very tragic situation. The stricter police and customs border controls led the migrants to follow routes far from the border crossing points. So we've seen more border crossings, irregular border crossings on foot. And of course, this higher demand for smuggling services, since it had become more difficult for the smugglers to work, and gradually the demand was getting bigger. This led to increase in the prices that the migrant smugglers asked from the migrants. So I will specifically refer it now to the role of the internet and social media in this period, which is more related actually to the objective of this of the Perceptions project. And I consider this very important. This is something that we've seen during this period, and it actually continues. So as I said, migrants stranded in various locations and countries, and this increased the demand for smuggling services. So where we've seen a big increase was in the use of internet and social media, particularly, and also other various types of applications for payments, mapping applications, encryption applications. There was a very big need for the migrants to quickly and safely get in touch with the smugglers, and also a big need for the smugglers to advertise actually their services to a big audience, let's say, of migrants. The role of social media is very important, because actually there is no, in most of the cases, there's no personal contact, no physical contact between the persons who are interacting, and it's actually safe, and it provides the possibility to provide remote payments. Most of these platforms also, they provide encrypted communication between migrants and smugglers. What we've seen also in some cases was some misinformation campaigns regarding COVID-19 narratives. So this means that we've heard that in specific areas, some of them actually outside of Greece, we've seen some rumors spread which actually were not true regarding possible reduction of measures, which while trying to make migrants again continue their route to Europe. Also, we've heard a lot of conspiracy theories regarding the pandemic also, and also regarding the role of the migration. What we faced also in Greece, in Turkey also, and in Serbia, if I'm not mistaken, we faced some situations where migrants were, through social media actually, they were called to proceed to massive movements outside of the country, which in the end was we were able to stop something like this, but in the beginning it created a lot of confusion. It was quite difficult to see what exactly is going on. And of course, there were some online discussions thank God something like this was not proven till now, that the COVID-19 could actually be used as a biological weapon, meaning that it could be actually used as a hybrid threat for some countries. And what is the outlook in relation to COVID? What we could anticipate? This is a rough estimate. What I personally think is that the pandemic will have short, medium, and long-term implications. Some of them will be permanent, of course. There were some trends created with now with the pandemic. As I said before, the use of new technologies now is becoming the normality. Online activities are rising more and more, and this trend will be accelerated. The organized crime groups, actually, as I said before, they resume their activity very quickly, and this means that because of the pandemic, they are becoming more resilient right now, and they are now more capable in doing the necessary changes in their modus operandi in order to avoid any measures from the law enforcement authorities. It would be possible to expect that some of the evolving countries will face probably economic and social downturn because of the pandemic. Maybe new how can I say? Maybe some new widespread of the virus could, in some areas, could cause bigger problems right now. So this could lead to inequalities, poverty, and unemployment, which are, of course, migration factors. The possible deterioration of health conditions in some origin countries could, of course, provoke migrations. I can bring the example of India when the Delta variant was spreading. And of course, this online propaganda regarding COVID, this vaccine, COVID-19 polarization that has been created, this could also possibly could create a downward spiral and reactivate violence, and of course leading to migration. So this is all from my side. I tried to summarize, let's say, all of the findings that we had during this period. I hope my presentation was helpful, and I'm glad to answer to any questions from your side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Basioukas. Thank you. Your presentation was very, very good and very enlightening, at least for us. I hope for our participants as well. We may have a couple of questions later on. I hope our audience as well. But let's go now to Mr. Tournakis, who is also coming from the Hellenic Police, the border point unit of Orestiáda, and of course we remain on the same topic, the law enforcement perspective, and looking forward to hearing him. Mr. Tournakis, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the floor. Good afternoon to all of you. My name is Georgios Tournakis, as it was already mentioned. I am the commander of Orestiáda border police unit, which is located in the district of Stavros in North Greece. I am working in the sector of border protection in the Hellenic Police for the last 12 years. Before I start, I would like to thank all partners of the Perceptions Project for this kind invitation to participate in this discussion with professionals who have a different point of view because of our different expertise. With my partners in Orestiáda, we prepared a very short presentation in order to make it easier for everyone to follow my thoughts. So allow me to share my screen. Well, I feel quite covered and impressed by the very detailed and excellent presentations of the previous speakers. Honestly, they covered, I feel, almost every aspect of this phenomenon. However, I will try to make a more operational approach to the same things. Last year, during a roundtable discussion in the framework of the project Perceptions Again, I was stating that foreigners who wanted to come to Europe from third countries were in some kind of a shock because of the lockdowns, which were taken as precaution measures for the expansion of COVID-19. In my point of view, this is not the case anymore, and this initial shock has passed many months ago. Although worldwide, legal migration is frozen because of the pandemic, however, on the other side, illegal migration is again active, and as the time passes with lockdowns and economic problems for all countries, and especially the poor ones, I feel that new migration flows will be generated. According to the trends that are being recorded, more migrants from third countries will seek their way to Europe. The feelings among these migrants are quite mixed, as we can see right now, depending on where they are located at the moment. Migrants who intend to migrate to Europe are fearing the tough measures that are being taken from European countries on the borders as a precaution for the expansion of the pandemic. On the other hand, migrants who are already staying illegally in European countries are feeling more relaxed because right now repatriations are not proceeding very fast for the very same reason as above. Some other interesting findings are the beliefs for the COVID-19 pandemic among these people. Some of the comments that have been written on social media are referring to God's or Allah's punishment, who is taking back everything that he gave to people. Some others are accusing the countries which are considered to be strong economies, and others are accusing Israel or Jewish people. And finally, as it was already said, there are various conspiracy theories which exist on the public discussion between the migrants. On the contrary, criminal organizations dealing with smuggling of people have reacted quickly, adapting to the new current conditions. Many false documents have been found on illegal migrants, and these documents, at this period, are not only passports or visas anymore, but also some vaccination certificates, some negative COVID-19 test results, etc. And once again, it is being proved that the business of smuggling networks is much more profitable during crisis periods. Either they are economic or medical crisis periods. About the reality faced by the migrants, the truth is that COVID-19, like all other viruses, does not discriminate people according to nationalities or religions. However, it wouldn't be wrong to say that these people are putting themselves in higher risk than the average, since during their travel they are exposed to extreme conditions, such as the hard weather conditions, overcrowded places or vehicles, etc. And as a result, their immune system becomes more vulnerable to diseases.
Sorry, Mr. Tournakis, sorry for interrupting you. I'm sorry. We're just stuck on our screen, the first page of your presentation. I don't know if everybody else is watching the same. We cannot see the rest of the pages of your presentation.
Okay. Actually, on my screen, it appears to be working correctly, so I don't know. Maybe I will stop and start again sharing.
Here, yeah, great.
Better now?
Now
Okay.
it's good. Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Some things or many things have already been said about the social life of these people. I will say that the pandemic appears to be affecting also, of course, the social lives of the migrants who are already on European soil. Firstly, the local and national restrictions of movement during a pandemic in every European country is a serious obstacle to the movement of the migrants who seek for access to the asylum procedure or other reception procedures in the destination countries. What's more, remote work for adults and remote education for kids is not accessible to most of the migrants, mainly for economic reasons. Moreover, in the European societies, there has been a belief among some locals that migrants are carriers of illnesses, and this belief is an additional problem and risk that migrants are exposed to. Fortunately, this racist belief is not spread among a big amount of people. And lastly, about us, let's say, about the border guards, the border surveillance, about the service providers and the first line practitioners, I have to say that the latest public health conditions brought also new working conditions for the service providers and the first line officers. Most of these people are very concerned and in some cases quite nervous about putting themselves and their families into health risks. The trend of remote work can apply for some service providers. However, for sure, it is not always applicable to the law enforcement authorities, such as the Hellenic police. For that reason, the Hellenic police headquarters is issuing orders and guidelines for the first line officers, on the one hand, in order to protect their life, and on the other hand, to keep the agency working effectively during such a challenging period. Additionally, the commanders are every day reminding to the personnel the ways they can protect themselves, the agency, and of course, the public health. Finally, all these practitioners are provided with personal protection equipment, such as masks, gloves, or antiseptic liquids. In conclusion, I would say that for sure we are living in an era totally different than previously. All of us, and of course the whole world, needs to adapt to the new reality as smoothly as possible. The challenges are so many in every aspect of our personal and professional lives, but personally, I am confident that sooner or later we will return to normal. Since almost everything was covered, I tried to be as quick as possible. Of course, I am at your disposal for any comments, any questions that may occur in the procedure. For now, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for the time that I was given.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tournakis. That was very good to hear from the first line officer, your way of perceiving the situation, not only the migration phenomenon that still goes on, but also there are links with the COVID-19 pandemic that counts already 2 years and is going on. So new adaptations have already been set in place, but we may need some even more because the pandemic doesn't seem to be stopping very soon. So yeah, we may need to readapt our activities and our ways we manage all this phenomenon. And yeah, I'm sure there will be probably a few questions later on, but as soon as we finish the rest of the presentations. And yeah, let's go straight ahead to another service, the Hellenic Asylum Service. And the head of Attica Directorate of the Asylum Service, Mr. Stavros Apostolakis, who is going to talk about the shifting of demands on the asylum services and procedures during this pandemic, how this has affected their perceptions, the whole system, and what is the impact of that. So, Mr. Apostolakis, thank you very much for being here. You've got the floor.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Katerina. As Katerina said, I'm Stavros Apostolakis. I want to say a few things about me briefly. I hold a PhD degree in political economy, in political sociology and comparative policy analysis, and a postgraduate specialization degree in political economy. And right now I'm working as director of the Attica Directorate, as Katerina said, and as a research fellow of the Center of Security Studies. Furthermore, I'm a trainer on several European Asylum Support Office training curriculums, and I just want to inform you now that from yesterday, EASO renamed as EUAA, which is European Union Agency for Asylum, so they have a new name. And I have taught entrepreneurship and innovation in some universities. So I just want to share my screen now. Okay. Let me find how to. I'm sorry, I have something on my, you know.
It's the share screen button.
Okay, but
next to the chat.
Okay, and how can I go to my laptop screen in order to?
It is asking you to select the screen, maybe.
I can't find it.
If you want, you might send it to us so that we can share your screen, and you will tell us when you want us to go to the next slide, and you can do the talking.
Okay. How can I send it to you?
You can send it to me via email, and in the meantime, if it's okay with everyone, we can move on to the next presentation until I have received your email and
Let
your
me
presentation.
let me see.
Have you opened already the presentation in your computer, Mr. Stavros?
So I have to open it first.
Yes, open it first, and then when you push share, there will be a window telling you to select which one you want to share from your computer.
Okay.
So you will select the presentation.
Not this one.
Yes. So you have already shared your screen right now, but
this one. Can you see it now?
We can see your emails.
yeah. So you.
Okay. Can you see? Okay.
Yeah. That is perfect.
Okay. So I want to welcome everyone to this presentation about the role and the response of the Greek Asylum Service to the new challenge and to the new challenges and changing demands. The Asylum Service was established in 2011 by national law, which transported the directive on common standards and procedures in member states for internally and illegally staying third country national. Its main mandate is to enforce all applicable law regarding asylum and other forms of international protection, as well as to contribute to our national asylum policy and monitor its implementation. Appeals Authority was also created by the same law for examining appeals against Asylum Services' negative decision. Before 2011, all asylum applications were examined by the Hellenic police. The Asylum Service opened its doors for the applicants and general public for the first time on 7th June 2013. A lot of time has passed since then, and the law procedures and capacity have been enhanced substantially in large degree because of the establishment of common procedures at the EU level. The service currently operates 24 regional offices and units in all over the country, and besides the premises of the Aegean Islands, the main ones are in Attica, Katehaki, and Thessaloniki. The top countries of origin of applicants on the basis of new applications and backlog cases are currently Afghanistan, people from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and Syria. We cooperate with EUAF, the former EASO, IOM, UNHCR, and various partners, mostly officially registered NGOs. We're funded by a lot of EU grants, the national budget, and other resources. You see here the official structure. The service was initially formally independent and directly subordinated to the minister. On December 2020, a new organizational model for the whole ministry was put into effect, and we are now a general directorate with a governor and deputy governor under the General Secretariat of Immigration and Policy. As you can see, there are 5 directorates, 3 of which, the ones of Attica, which I'm heading, and another one of the regional services and of Aegean Islands. All those directorates supervise regional asylum offices and asylum units, the operational arms of the service. Our personnel is highly qualified and are considered of tenured and interim staff. EASO, former EASO, is contributing with asylum case workers and administrative personnel. It is to be noted that about 50% of top positions are covered by women. Due to the demanding nature of our work, great emphasis is put into training and guidance. Now you can see a typical regular asylum procedure flow. This is a typical flow of the examination under regular procedure of a request for international protection. Every person over 15 years old is obliged to attend a personal interview. Decisions are taken on an individual basis after thorough examination and determination based on the Geneva Convention of 1951 and the additional protocol of 1968. We always offer applicants free interpretation in their preferred or official language and free legal assistance for their appeal procedures. Now, let's use some basic statistics about us. Since the SAFE became operational, almost 350,000 persons have applied for asylum in one of our regional offices. In 2020 alone, 35,000 applicants were recognized as either refugees or beneficiary of subsidiary protection. It is worth mentioning that just in the first 11 months of 2021, pending decisions in the first and second instances were reduced by half. So you see at the first graphic how the applications were. If you see the spike it's about 2015 and 2016, and we had a very big number at 2011. Then the numbers starting to fall. You can see the decisions, but the very interesting thing is that last year we have the numbers for the first 11 months of 2021, and you can see that we have a 49% drop at the backlog of the pending decision of both instances. Okay, now we're going to the basic examination procedures. Various procedures for examining an application for international protection are followed, depending on parameters such as the mode of time of entry, nationality, vulnerability, family relations, and the validity of asylum claims. The most common are the regular and accelerated procedures, which are used when entrance is effected through land borders or before 2016, which is the date that the EU and Turkey common statement for readmission of immigrants took place. Border procedure is used in the case of mass arrival of applicants to the Aegean Islands from Turkey after 2016, with restrictions of stay on the islands until the claims are fully examined. Admissibility examination under the concept of Turkey as a safe country applies since 2021 to applicants from Bangladesh, Pakistan, Syria, Somalia, Afghanistan, whether they are on the islands or on the mainland. This is a new procedure which states, if you want me to explain, that if they came through Turkey and they don't have a specific reason to make us believe that Turkey is not safe for them, they have to go back to Turkey. Since December 2021, and this is something very fresh, Albania and North Macedonia are considered safe third countries too, for all applicants entering Greece after crossing their territory. Safe countries of origin were established at the last year, January 2021, and these are Ghana, Senegal, Togo, Gambia, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Albania, Georgia, Ukraine, India, Armenia, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. Dublin cases are based on qualified reunification of families and previous admittance or recognition in another member state. And finally, relocation programs into other countries are successfully implemented through vulnerable applicants, especially unaccompanied minors and beneficiaries of international protection. Since the beginning of the pandemic of COVID-19, the ministry decided to use various of electronic services for facilitating access to many to our procedures without physical presence being necessary. Digitalization of processes with solutions such as electronic document management, online collaboration, communication platforms, as well as digital signature, enabled us to do more and in a more efficient way. To fulfill the urgent need to serve applicants and beneficiaries of international protection electronically, we introduced new applications and processes such as electronic self-registration, mass communication through Viber, electronically enabled renewal of resident permits, electronic notification of decision, applicants' information systems, such as tax and insurance numbers, appointments, etc., online application, change of contact details, you can do those online, correction of personal information, issuing copies and submission of documents, among others. These adjustments had an immediate positive impact in our operations since the number of people visiting our offices and the waiting times were greatly reduced. To sum up, the Greek Asylum Service has come of age. It can respond to rapidly changing circumstances successfully and improve every aspect of the receipt and examination of asylum claims. Greece is the only EU country this year where the asylum decision backlog was reduced instead of increasing. And this is something that Eurostat stated officially last month. We were the only country, I repeat myself, where the decision backlog was reduced last year. We have the skills, expertise, and support to be confident about the future of asylum space in the EU, where responsibility meets solidarity. Thank you very much for your attention and patience. And I'm sorry about the time that it took for me in order to upload the PowerPoint.
No, don't worry. Everything worked well afterwards. Thank you very much for the presentation. We already have a few questions in the chat and from other participants, but we will have them all together collected. And
so
we'll
you want me to reply at the end of the presentation?
At the end, yeah. We have two more speakers. And as soon as they have also finished, I would like to pose those questions to you as well. And yeah, we'll do it all together afterwards. So thank you for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So let's go to our next speaker, our next topic, actually, the adaptation to crisis, some views from the Frontline from people working in the first line with the migrants themselves. And I would like to welcome Mrs. Christianna Mourouzi from Médecins Sans Frontières Greece, who is a humanitarian affairs officer, and she's going to present us the situation in the front line. Thank you, Ms. Mourouzi. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Georgakopoulou, and thank you, Kemea, for the invitation. So I'm going also to share my screen. Let me know if you see the presentation. Is it okay?
Yeah, if you would just like to do full screen. Yeah.
Okay, great. Actually, this is, as you said, Ms. Georgakopoulou, this is kind of the other side of most of the things that were mentioned before by the previous speakers. Just to have an idea, I will have a brief overview of what we are doing in Greece right now and how we actually adjusted to COVID and what we see as the main challenges for migrants and the people we serve. The programs of MSF in Greece during the pandemic and still are, it's in Athens and in the islands of Lesbos and Samos. The daycare center in Athens is a clinic which specializes in sexual and reproductive health as well as mental health. We are supporting victims of sexual violence, and a big activity and part of the program is the health promotion in Malakasa, Eleonas, and in general, like outreach in the urban setting of Athens. During the previous 2 years, let's say, that where the pandemic has taken place, we also ran a clinic in Athens for victims and survivors of torture, which was a program running since 2014, but it was finalized at the end of 2021. But then again, offering holistic services for survivors of torture, like and health, psychological support, mental health support, physiotherapy, and social and legal support with other actors. In Lesbos, we have 2 clinics where we treat victims of violence and survivors of torture and sexual violence. We offer mental health support in adults and children, vaccinations to children, general vaccinations to children, and of course, we focus on sexual and reproductive health. Similarly, in Samos, we have a clinic for sexual and reproductive health, mental health support, and of course, we cover first aid, psychological support, and emergency referrals to the relevant authorities and institutions. But then COVID happened, so we had also to adjust. Briefly to say that apart from the activities that we adjusted on COVID, we also, for migrants, I mean, we also had these activities that you can see, where we offered psychological support to healthcare staff, patients, and their relatives under a collaboration with the medical school of the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. One big activity was to offer mental health support to staff that were working in elderly care centers. Maybe you know, and maybe you are aware that during the pandemic, it was a big issue with the centers for elderly care. And of course, we did and we continue donating protective equipment, masks, and so on to hospitals and other civil society organizations and other institutions. Now, focusing on migrants and the projects we have for migrants and refugees, Since the beginning, what we did was to, with the help of the health promoters, cultural mediators, and people from the community that speak the languages, to share COVID-19 prevention and protection measures. And as it was mentioned before, the camps, as they were in the past years, we supported with water and sewage systems, enhancing this part of the camps for better sanitation and for better support of people living in the camps. Of course, also we had in Lesbos Island a special treatment area for patients with symptoms similar to those of COVID-19 and for possible, maybe possible cases of COVID-19. And again, in Lesbos, we have a team supporting the newcomers in the quarantine space in Megala Therma. This continues until today, and we support with the information campaign and explaining to migrants and refugees what is the new framework, let's say, and the changes in the measures taken by the state for the prevention and protection against COVID-19. A major change, and what we have seen mostly, was a big gap in the urban setting of Athens for asylum seekers, refugees, undocumented migrants. Therefore, in August 2021, we started operating a new center, a new clinic, where, with the support of social workers, we were trying to facilitate the process for booking the appointment for vaccination and, of course, issuing the relevant certificate. And at the same time, as in the previous activities, with health promotion, health promoters reaching out, going out in the center of Athens to inform and maybe also break the misinformation that is taking place regarding the vaccination in the communities, because many of refugees and migrants have, as we do, this information like and fears for the vaccine, and if it is good or not good to have it. However, with this, the center sees, of course, mostly asylum seekers, refugees, and undocumented persons, but it was very clear that information for a center like that, to have someone that is accessible, came from whichever in the urban setting of Athens, that they needed support with the procedure. For example, even elderly people that they didn't have the ease with computers, they would also come and ask for information of printing and issuing the certificate. What we have seen as challenges from our work with the adaptation and the activities that I mentioned before were and are the administrative obstacles that are blocking migrants and refugees from receiving the COVID-19 vaccine. It's been, as I said, the center started its operation in August. And to have an idea, until October, from the 655 people that reached to the center in this period of 3 months, 8% of them had problems with their documents. It was and it is a big activity of the team to support with overcoming these obstacles, and we are in constant communication with respective authorities to convey the problems and convey what is happening. I just want to mention here that even though it was late in September 2021, the law passed for people with undocumented people to have access to the vaccination, which is being specialized since October with joint ministerial decisions. And it's a big project and it's a big work that we are also supporting for helping and assisting with vaccinations for people without documents. What we have seen also was that there was an unnecessary restrictive COVID-19 measures, especially in the camps, and I'm talking about mostly the big waves of COVID, where people were locked up for a long period of time in the camps without having without being able to go out. And it was something that it was also mentioned before that had a big risk for the heavily populated camps as they were at that time. And we still see that with COVID, there is a deprivation of basic services and protection. We see migrants and refugees lacking the access to basic services. For example, there was for example, the measures taken in end of November, December, when we had a spike in cases where people that did not have the vaccine could not enter the public services, which required a rapid test. And we had this paradox of people that were trying to book their appointment for vaccination to go to a public service, in this case, the KEP, the Centers for Civil Support, Civilian Support. They would like to go there to book the appointment to go for the vaccination, but they couldn't do their rapid test, which is officially registered, because they did not have the social security number. And we are talking about the temporary social security number, but I wouldn't like to take much more of the time of the practicalities. It's something that we are trying also to support, and as I said, to convey and resolve this issue so that all people, no matter what, have access to vaccination, irrespective of their documents, because we're talking about an issue of public health. And one major problem, I think it was also mentioned from colleagues for Cyprus, it was the correct and up-to-date information in various languages. It was a big gap, and it still is a gap of having official announcements on the measures and not being inclusive in fast so that people have the correct information. As you have said, we don't see the pandemic finishing very soon. There are a lot of things that need to be done still. We always try to adapt and support those who have mostly need in accessing their basic rights and access to their healthcare, mostly rights, because one thing that I did not mention was apart from COVID that was influencing the whole situation, we have, as for the general population, healthcare issues that were not covered as they should have. Thank you for your attention. I hope I did not take a lot of time, and I'm here for any question you might have. Thank you, and
thank you very much. Thank you. I'm sure we'll have a few questions later on. And so in order not to be more delayed, because I'm sure we'll have some discussions afterwards, let's go straight to Mrs. Kassinis to present us our last speaker for today.
Thank you, Elena. A quick word. Gosia Crysanthou is a member of the board of Caritas Cyprus, as well as a social advisor to the Cyprus Refugee Council, in a seconded arrangement from the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. She has, so she'll talk to us a little bit about the Cyprus context, which I think will be really quite kind kind of not just a repetition, but more a complement to what we've been hearing and the presentation from MSF right now. Thank you. Over to you, Gosia.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. Yes, we could easily identify with a lot that has been said already about long queues, about overcrowded places, about access to vaccinations and the vicious circles with rapid tests and access to services because of it. I'm a frontline officer in Nicosia, working from 3 places really that we, during the pandemic, were meeting people directly. And this is where we saw everything that has already been mentioned. We have a migrant center in Nicosia, which is a first point of contact for our beneficiaries and us to meet. We used to have shelters that we had to close because of pandemics. We had 2 shelters for mothers with children and men, but due to quarantine requirements, they were not able to function. So this is an immediate effect of COVID. And we have a humanitarian aid distribution center. So these 3 places have been very much impacted immediately by the pandemic. How we worked before the pandemic, so we can see the difference, how pandemic had impacted our work, is as a first point of contact in our migrant center, we had an open door policy. Everybody who needed help could come at any time during our working hours and receive help, or at least information where they could receive help. We specialize in response to emergencies, especially medical emergencies. We've had situations when people who approached us needed an ambulance immediately. We specialize in information giving and directing people to various offices or places where they can get help or information. We support them with completion of documents, give them templates of documents they need to complete, explain to them how it needs to be done, so they can actually manage. We also provide humanitarian support. So those who are in immediate need of food, clothing, blankets can also benefit from us. And we follow up on and do advocacy on access to the rights that people have or should have, as well as we inform and help with repatriations. This is all in cooperation with various government offices. We cooperate very closely with all government offices. So this policy, our open door policy in our migrant center, stopped working as well as it was before because of the pandemics. Immediately, the restriction of the government on the number of people that could be in one place impacted us to the point where we had to move our services almost to the parking lot. And even there, it was difficult to control the crowd. So most of our time really spent was on policing the crowds who could not access the services. Hrishabh already mentioned this a lot. The delays with services, no access to government offices, of course, created a situation that people who could not access a government service would come to an NGO like ours, who had an open door policy. All of a sudden, we could not continue the same way, which created crowds outside of our office. Our food delivery increased. We never delivered food to people. We distributed food. All of a sudden, during COVID, with lockdowns, we had to deliver food to people. So this was something new that COVID brought to us. Our beneficiaries coming to our offices had no access to masks. We needed to provide them with masks and have a constant supply to be able to serve them and to prevent them from being fined for not having masks to which they had no access. Information on vaccines and government regulations in various languages. This was very vital information. Most of them really did not know where to look and where to receive reliable information in the language they could understand and in the form that was simple enough for them to understand and follow. Medical referrals of COVID patients. The information of what to do when I have COVID was very scarce, and even if I knew where to call, I would find that the person on the other line of the phone did not speak my language. The services were not prepared to even know how to find people who had COVID and how to help them, because people were not able to describe their addresses where they lived. so this was also something new for us to deal with medical services. There were a lot of myths about the COVID itself and the vaccine. I believe we played a big role in diffusing the myths and dispelling fears. I think this was best visible in our cooperation with the Ministry of Health when the whole population of asylum seekers and the access to vaccine was completely forgotten. The vaccines were there, but the procedure of how to reach people and how the people can actually be vaccinated was not really worked out, at least at the initial stages of vaccinations. And I think we played a very big role linking our beneficiaries to the services, by making services aware of the demand, how big the demand was, and testing the ground before the services could provide it regularly and efficiently. So this was what was new for us. Now, what the situation is right now is, as I mentioned, we do not have an open door policy anymore because of the regulations. This changed our logistics because we have to reach people where they are rather than invite them to come to us. We have to monitor the appointments, which immediately means that we are not able to serve as many as before. And this is in the situation when, because of lack of access or limited access to government services, the number of beneficiaries needing help actually increase. They increase anyway because more of them are coming, and yet we are decreasing access to even us to be able to help them because of the COVID regulations. Online services, yes, we see that the situation of COVID has pushed the government to create online services. Mr. Apostolakis mentioned this in Greece, and it looks very positive. It was a positive thing. However, a lot of details have not been worked out in Cyprus. So what we've seen is, for example, registration in the labor office is to be done now online on the online platform. However, what was forgotten is the whole population of people who do not speak the language, who do not have access to computers or even smartphones, who do not have email addresses or don't know how to operate them, who really cannot cope with the electronic version of services. And there is no other alternative. So either you do it or you are lost in this whole system. The system is not simple. It needs to be added. The registration itself is not simple. It requires, for example, sending an email to the labor office as a second step of the registration, with all documents in a special version in PDF, within the limits of the megabytes that can be received on the other side. There are a lot of things that can work, cannot work very well. So this again impacts access of people to their rights, to services, to help. As an organization, we have also had to stop our social activities. We were very strong on not only providing services and looking for most vulnerable and being the first line officers, but we used to do a lot of social activities and integrational activities, language classes, for example, homework, children homework activities, and many others, cultural and sports activities, which of course with COVID were not possible. This affected our beneficiaries very much. It really dampened their spirits, but it also affected us because all of a sudden, as staff and volunteers, we could not balance the work of dealing with very difficult issues and very traumatizing stories with very little to offer sometimes because of the situation. And at the same time, we could not balance it off with having a little bit of quality time with our beneficiaries in a more I don't want to say fun, but maybe more uplifting environment. And this had an immediate impact on us as a team, but of course on the beneficiaries and mental health for sure for all of us. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. I think, Katerina, I don't know if you've been monitoring our chat for questions, and if you want to go, if
Yeah. So yeah, before that, I would like to just ask all the participants if they have some questions to put right now directly to our speakers before passing on the written questions that we already have. So, okay, let's go to our CAMED team who has had some questions already from the chat and their own questions. So, I don't know, Yannis, would you like to start?
Hello, everybody. According to Mr. Paul Hutchins, he has a question. What is the process for returning people to Turkey and what assurances are there for their safety? Anyone from the participants can reply, and anybody from the speakers as well.
Okay, can I speak? Can I say something about that?
Sure. Yeah, please.
Okay. As far as the Greek Asylum Service is concerned, the application of the law which states that Turkey is a safe country for this, for the people from those countries, the countries that I said before. This decision was taken based upon the country of origin information about those countries and about the status of the people that are going to be returned to Turkey. And this happens only if during the personal interview, we don't come up with a reason, they don't say something about them having any specific problems, a problem if they go back to Turkey. So we bear in mind that during the personal interview, if let's say a person says that, okay, I'm from Syria, but I will give you an example, but I'm in Kurdish political party, this should be taken into consideration in order for him to not be back in Turkey. So it's not automatic. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I would also like to ask something, first of all, Mr. Apostolakis from the Asylum Service, because it has been mentioned that asylum processes are halted due to the pandemic, of course, for quite some time now. And I guess this will be the case indefinitely. It's unknown until when exactly, obviously. So this creates, of course, many issues health-wise, pandemic, physical, mental health issues. And given the fact that the Council of Europe has asked again for alternatives to detention, I was wondering whether we have any official guidelines on how to handle this situation, or even if there are options right now, even for Greece at the borders, to have alternatives that might work for detention.
Okay, can I say something about COVID too?
Of course, because it was meant for you.
Okay, thank you. So, in order to, let's say, be prepared about this whole situation and about the quarantines and all those things, we try to put people in to take people from the borders and put them in different locations at the center of the country. So there are some, let's say, other facilities, bigger ones. So they are, let's say, they're safe there, and there is a lot of space in order for them to keep distance, in order for them to have specific room if they tested positive. When facility, we have, let's say, some people with COVID, we don't take people for interviews or registration from this facility for 2 weeks or something like that. And in the top of that, we started doing interviews through Teams, and so they can be at the facility and we we have the interpreter in a specific area, we have the caseworker in another area, and the applicant in another area, in order to cope with this, let's say, this condition, which is a little bit difficult, and we have to be innovative in order to continue working and at the same time respect the health protocols.
Of course. So there are provisions that are in place, and you think that they are working so far. I mean, they are effective.
As far as numbers are concerned, you see they are, let's say, at least effective. In my point of view, when you have a crisis like that, and I said it to every workshop that I take place, when you have a special condition like this, it's a very big problem, but at the same time, it's a window for innovation. And if you can take advantage of the situation in order to, let's say, make great use of the new technology instruments that you have on your hands, then when all those difficult situations stops, then afterwards we can see that we took full advantage of this new technology, and I think something good will come up after this whole difficult situation.
Great. You covered me. I would also like to ask something of Mr. Basioukas, if I am not taking up too much time, because he mentioned something about the use, well, a bit of a conspiracy theory of pertaining to the use of COVID as a biological weapon. And I was wondering whether this whole theory had to do with utilizing migrants who are already sick, or even recruiting migrants as an act of terrorism. What was the whole, narrative and the idea behind it? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. So what we thought about, and what we heard in a couple of occasions from sources, but in the end it was not proven, was referring to migrants possibly affected by the virus, and with a big actual number of migrants, and with their arrival causing problems and leading to the possible contamination of the law enforcement authorities and the other migrants. So nothing related to terrorism, but this itself could be considered a hybrid threat if it was to take place.
Because it would create outbreaks.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, thank you. If anyone else has any other, of course, question, go ahead.
Hi.
Yes, please, by all means. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Hi, it's Elizabeth. I had a question, actually. One of the themes that I noted from all of the speakers, from Hrishabh to the conspiracy theories we were just talking about, is the lack of, is how things are complicated by a lack of accurate and timely information, and this sort of asymmetry of information and access to information. I was wondering if any of the speakers had kind of, what would they, if they had a magic wand, how do we solve this effectively? Again, this is a theme of the Perceptions Project, which is how do you frame the narrative, and how do we make it so that you turn misperceptions into, a bit of a more accurate. And I was just wondering if they had, is it word of mouth? Is it the internet? Is it social media? So yes, from any and all of the speakers, actually. Thank you.
If I may, from my side, yes, I agree that it's a difficult issue. It's not easy to control situations like that. The access to the internet, and actually the huge proportion of the migrants that arrive in every country, they have access to internet actually. So it's not very easy to inform them or try to change some of the perceptions that they have. But some information campaigns could take place. I think in some of the occasions have already taken place. In some other some similar situations, I remember that we were sending like a massive SMS or SMS messages to an area, to people who were one specific area, or since everyone is using now social media, the bigger the more that you publish official statements about what the real situation is, the better that this passes to them. Also, if you have some connections with officials, some representatives, let's say from some communities, so this more easily could make the statements from the statements from the government, could make them more how can I say, make them more believable to the migrants.
If I may, just echoing Mr. Basioukas' point here, I feel, just looking at from a lowest common denominator approach, I think most migrants have access to smartphones. And I really don't see why in this day and age governments cannot develop. I mean, if we've got, Safe Pass apps and COVID certificate apps, how difficult is it to build information backend into that app that goes out in multiple languages? This is a very simple question of prioritizing translations for people who don't understand the dominant language, which is Greek and English. I think this is the same in Greece as well. Like, just have it go out in 5 or 6 languages. It can, go off of Google Translate backend. So I think there are innovative solutions to addressing this information gap quite easily. The question is it a priority? And then the second thing, and I'll come back to this, is I think whatever happens, I think there's no excuse for also stopping the initial language learning courses or classes, and I think this has potential for a major flashpoint, because if people don't understand basic instructions, basic things, you're creating mistrust, you're creating difficulties of communications between communities, and I think again we have technology. There was definitely physical language classes being taught physically before the pandemic. How difficult is to put this online? And this should really come back on being a priority. And it allows people to bide their time. And while they're waiting, and a lot of us have been locked up for many months. Doing something like learning a language is possible. So I think developing an app and learning and restarting language learning capacities, to me, would be the most important things to address this information gap going forward.
Thank you. Katerina, there's been
Thank
some
you very much.
questions in the chat.
Yeah.
So.
I see the questions in the chat. Actually, I don't know if Sergey would like to develop a little bit his remark, his question, of course, because he's here present and he's a task leader in the Perceptions project. We work together. Thank you, Sergey, for being here.
Thanks, Katerina, and thanks to all speakers. It was really interesting. I'm trying to kind of capture the discussion, if I can, in Twitter posts as well. So you will see the sort of the notes which I'm taking from each presentation, trying to give you summary of the discussion. But I was really interested in the example provided by I think it was Gosia, who was talking from Caritas Cyprus perspective about the paradoxical situations, and it's really interesting how these paradoxical situations emerge during the COVID pandemic, when people who are undocumented in order to access healthcare system and get healthcare support need the document, which they don't have. So there's kind of a very strange sort of situation. Or when Gosia was talking about the online services, which is kind of designed with the view of people understanding how they work, and then basically, not allowing people to get online access because of the attachments or the formatting of the services or the need to provide certain information. And I was really curious, I would love to ask all the speakers, if I can, to think about these paradoxical situations, maybe share them with us, because they can tell us what kind of changes are needed. They kind of point to systematic issues, to maybe sort of lack of thinking about some of these connections within the system, which we would like to address in our project. So I'll be grateful if you can expand on it, where we can do it. Thank you.
Yes, if I may. I think the particular example about the rapid test was given by Christianna from Greece.
Apologies.
But we have a similar situation when our asylum seekers released from the camp after the initial assessment, with their documents are required to have, we call it a QR code in order to access supermarkets, in order to access medical services. And because of a telephone number given when they leave the camp, it's a telephone number of the camp given to them, they are not able to actually download this code onto their telephone, which means that they cannot have access to any services, including supermarkets. So this is the problem we are dealing with in Cyprus right now. But I can give another two examples of how this of these ridiculous situations that can take place when one step is not followed. The biggest impact is lack of residence permit or the first document that a person needs to receive to confirm the residence, which in case of asylum seekers is a confirmation letter in Cyprus. Without this document, for example, a baby born cannot have a birth certificate and cannot have access to medical care because the mother cannot proceed with any of this because of any delay or the lack of the proper document. This has got huge impact on the well-being, even health or life of the baby and the mother. The second example is all of a sudden the social welfare office is closed. There is no access because of COVID or COVID contact there or any other reason, protection of workers or overcrowding outside. A person cannot obtain a document, a letter to open a bank account, for example, and without this bank account, he cannot cash a check that he had previously received from the very same office. So the offices are producing papers that cannot be used further because there is no support system to actually facilitate use of the documents produced. Access to labor market and medical care, no one paper missing and the person cannot access any of these. For me, the solution is definitely to go online make the services as much online as possible. But again, they have to be done in a way that is very accessible and easy for people to follow, even those who do not speak English as a first language. And I must say that for me, it's an utmost pleasure to do any online service with the UK government. Their websites, all the online services are so simple to use. It's a simple yes and no question. One question per screen, and it's yes or no, or a multiple choice kind of answer, which is very easy to follow. And I think this is the only way, if we are to go online, it has to be very simple for it to work. Otherwise, we're just creating more problems and obstacles for people and frustration for all of us.
Okay, thank you. We have another question in the chat from Mr. Kokinis that pertains to how the NGOs assess the EU response. You can see it in the chat, pertaining again to the preferred destination as a federation of member states. And he addresses this question about the EU response to NGOs and public sector organizations alike. So whomever of you would like to answer or discuss on that?
If I may, I can share one thought in terms of what we have seen, at least from our work working with migrants and refugees. The whole approach was we would characterize as discriminatory. I mean, of course, we had to adapt. Everyone had to adapt, but I think it was mentioned early beginning in the conference that those who were lower in the society faced much more difficulties in the whole pandemic. Even if we talk about the documents, if we talk about basic rights, one other example I have in mind from what was happening was the fines for not wearing a mask in public spaces. You could hear many of migrants, like homeless, in the urban setting of Athens, for example, where we work, where they don't have the basics and they couldn't even afford the masks. And then they could get repeatedly, not only once, but repeatedly fines because they were not wearing the mask. So I think this paradox and maybe this not inclusive perspective of everyone, of the most vulnerable, I would say, not only migrants, of the most vulnerable that do not have access to basic procedures, to basic rights, then the measures were very harsh on them. So from that perspective, we would say it was a failed approach on how to protect everyone in this extreme and extraordinary situation we are living.
Great, thank you very much. I don't know if anybody else would like to react on that question. Otherwise, because we are almost running out of time, I would like to go to the last question that we have received from Mr. Papanikolaou from Fandea. And well, I think that addresses to Mr. Apostolakis, but if you would like to state his remarks on his own to Mr. Apostolakis, that would be great. So I wouldn't have to reproduce his thoughts if he wants, of course. Mr. Papanikolaou?
Yeah, sure. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone, to all the speakers and the perceptions partners. Yeah, more or less is what I wrote in the chat, that if Mr. Apostolakis, mainly from his experience, and of course or other speakers who have also experience in the field, to give us an overview of how the asylum process was affected in all of its stages on those years of the COVID effect. I have mentioned some of the dimensions in the question in the chat. It would be very, very useful to have an overview from them, since they're experts. Thank you very much.
Okay, if I may answer. First of all, at the beginning of the pandemic, we wanted to have some time in order to prepare ourselves for those new circumstances. So there was some time in which the services remained closed for the audience. And in this time, we prepare ourselves. We facilitated a lot of people to write decisions in order to reduce the backlogs. And afterwards, we started, let's say, having some registration, as I said, through internet. We opened again, and we reschedule our interviews in order to receive less people because we have to bear in mind the restrictions that had to do with COVID. And after a while, because then restrictions became less, and they, you know, it's not something statical. It's something that we have to follow every week. We have directions through our ministry in order to, they give us the percentage of the people that we can accept and the percentage of people that teleworking or they can go and work in person. So we have to be we have to be very elastic and to see every month we make meetings and we reorganize our policy and our strategy in order to be, in order to be productive and have the results that we are aiming for.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I don't know if anybody else would like to give some feedback on that. Otherwise, I have a small, very small final question before we close our today's event, because we're already on time of closure. My question will be mainly addressed to Mrs. Mourouzi and Mrs. Chrysanthou. You talked about the migrants, and I would like to say, from your point of view as first line people being there in the field, and I would like to know, how did you realize, or if you even realize, that the perceptions of migrants about Europe have been shifted during COVID pandemic, if they have, and in which way have you realized that happening? And also Mrs. Mourouzi referred more specifically to lack of right information. And I would like to know a little bit more in which regard we're talking about misinformation and by whom that would probably be. So just two small quick questions if you would like to.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So actually, information, it can be in many levels, because you can understand that we are talking about perceptions, yes, and perceptions might differ from when the journey starts and when you actually land in Greece. So this information is very much needed to adjust to the reality. So on one hand, I think this, and maybe it connects to the previous question, also working with community leaders within the community. Yes, social media are very powerful, and you can access and you can target, because, for example, when with our project with COVID-19 in the center of Athens, we actually had a targeted social media campaign with our comms department, and it was the results were very impressive. They were actually it can work very well. But at the same time, working with community leaders, with people that have credibility within the migrant communities, can also show that you can trust and bust the myths and what is happening. And the information, it has to do also even on how to apply for asylum from the very beginning, or what are my rights, or from the question like my procedural guarantees, what can I do, what can I not do. So this from this information to, of course, COVID, like you are not allowed to go in a supermarket, no, to I don't know where, because you need to show a certificate, since we're talking about this level of information right now. Now, concerning Europe, I would say it is similar to the perceptions. You need to be there so that you find the information yourself. I don't think perceptions for Europe have changed a lot for migrants, despite COVID. The information is still the same on what Europe means for them. I don't know if I covered the question.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if Ms. Crysanthou would like to add something on that.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
I think our geographical position of being on the fringe of Europe reflects only the situation in the country, that it's not really Europe. This is the first perception that our beneficiaries, our migrants and asylum seekers give us when they are shocked by the conditions that they see, by lack of access to rights or immediate they they are shocked and they say, this is not Europe. And sometimes we have to admit that maybe this is not the best reflection of what Europe really is, because a lot of things are not working in the European way in Cyprus. This is just how it is. It being a small island and very much, on the east of the Mediterranean and closer to Middle East rather than the European mainland. The first response to pandemic, actually we had two extreme reactions. It was quite interesting for me personally, because I remember at the beginning, as the pandemic was being announced, I had a group of African beneficiaries in front of the Migrant Center who fell down on their knees and they started praying, and they say, fall down on your knees as well and pray. We know what it is. You've not lived through Ebola. They used Ebola as an example of what pandemic can mean. So there was a group of asylum seekers who saw COVID as a very big threat to their health and their lives. They took it very, very seriously. We've had people who locked themselves up in the houses before the lockup and did not want to leave, and used their experience as justification of their behavior.
We have a bit of a sound issue.
Yes, the COVID is not going to affect migrant population. The Africans were immune to it. The Arabic population believed that Allah will protect them. We've heard these comments. And it was just a will of God, and there was nothing to be done to prevent it, to protect yourself. We just need to get on with our lives. So there were just these two extreme behaviors that we saw in response to the pandemic. In terms of information, they very much rely on us, because a lot of things that are officially published do not work in practice. So there is already, even among Cypriots, there is this kind of approach that, okay, what I read in the newspaper, I need to verify with my neighbor, with my colleague, with my family member, who has already got some experience, practical experience. And we feel the same, that our beneficiaries, even if they read something, they will come to us to verify that, yes, it's going to work the way that it says it should. Sometimes we have to say, yes, it will. And sometimes we have to say, well, actually, it will not work exactly that way. You need to do this before.
And again, the connection is not very good.
Yeah, it's not very good, the connection. We lost some of your final words, I think. I don't know if you had any, the last probably sentence, we lost your final sentence, if you could just repeat it.
I was talking about the information. There is very little trust to official information presented in Cyprus generally. We all tend to, migrants or locals, we all tend to want to verify what's officially out there and filter it through personal experience. So we've learned that what is published in the newspaper may not necessarily work in practice. We ourselves look for sources of verification of information we read, and so do migrants. We feel that as an NGO, we play this role. They come to us, and even if we publish something on our Facebook as information to be followed, they tend to come and ask for a verification. Is it going to work? Are you sure? This is what they said. Is it true? So there is this, maybe mistrust is too strong a word, but this need for verification of the official information published, for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your interventions. And well, we're really out of time, so it's not in our favor. I would like to ask our fellow co-organizers if they have some final remarks, Mrs. Kassinis, Mr. Bratska, on the event, so that we could wrap up and close the session.
No, just to thank everyone for quite an interesting discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Bratskas? From Aditas, or somebody else from Aditas would like to have a final comment or remark on our event?
It was a very interesting webinar, and the roundtable, all the aspect of the stakeholders, the first line responders, and as citizens, I want to thank them for their precious work that they are doing in the community. And of course, as collaborator in this project, I want to thank you for their presence in this webinar. Thank you.
So yeah, from my side as well, thank you all for participating. Of course, firstly, mostly our honorable speakers that took time today to have their presentation and answer the questions, and our co-organizers, Ms. Kasimis, Mr. Bratskas, for today's event, and of course the participants, you that made the discussion even more vivid. And I would just like to tell you that all the creative materials that will be produced for this event, we will share it with you afterwards, of course, so that you have an idea how this event assisted on Perceptions. And you can find, as I said before, on the Perceptions platform and the social media, the relevant information about our event today. And other than that, thank you very much. Thank you for being here, for participating. And I wish you a very good afternoon to everybody.
Thank
you again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.